What if I told you that the easiest and most effective way to create naturalistic fake rocks has been out there all along, but just hasn't been taken to the vivarium hobby yet? Let me introduce you to Hypertufa, an easy way of creating naturalistic, lightweight fake tufa rocks using a mixture of cement and various lightweight aggregates. Using it correctly does require some patience and knowledge, but I have to say that it delivers a remarkably nice and naturalistic result with very little work put into it. It's frequently used in horticulture, especially in alpine gardens, but the number of times I've seen it being used in the vivarium hobby so far can be counted on only one hand. This is part 3 of my series Vivarium Rebirth, where I'm dismantling and rebuilding my biggest vivarium to take it to the next level. If you want to watch all the episodes in order, you can check out the playlist I have linked in the description. The first step is to create a core for the background, to keep down the weight of it even further and to get the main shape down. For this, I decided to use XPS insulation foam, which is similar to normal styrofoam but slightly harder and doesn't consist of the same cells that get all over the floor when you carve it. You could also use normal styrofoam or expanding foam. I cut up 2 pieces to the proper size by making a cut in the panel, turning it upside down and stepping on it. Then I started sketching out rough outlines of rocks that I wanted to make, and then it was time to go wild with a kitchen knife. Carving foam is a recurring theme that you're probably familiar with through some other methods of making vivarium backgrounds, but my thought process in this case was a little bit different. First of all, I only focus on getting the shape roughly right without caring about the fine details, since this will all be covered in a thick layer of Hypertufa. Second of all, given that the Hypertufa layer has to be fairly thick, I made all the grooves between the rocks very wide. If I was just carving the foam to eventually paint it, I would obviously not have made inch-wide gaps between all the rocks. A general recommendation when you're making these kinds of backgrounds is to always make the gaps between the rocks very deep, especially in this case since I have to squeeze Hypertufa into them, but also in general, because otherwise the result will look very flat and two-dimensional. Using a knife is definitely not the most effective way of doing this, and I think the knife I used wasn't very well suited for this either, so all in all it took me more than 3 hours to finish both pieces. Using a wire brush drill bit, a hot wire cutter or simply a better knife would save a lot of time. Once I was done, I scratched up all the flat surfaces of the foam to give it more texture for the Hypertufa to adhere to. Finally, I treated it with a heat gun. This made all of the gaps between the rocks slightly deeper and cleaner. Also, to my pleasant surprise, the small scratches I made got even bigger now, to further improve the Hypertufa's ability to adhere to them. You have probably seen people shape foam for vivarium backgrounds many times before, but now it's time to bring out the real reason you clicked on this video, the Hypertufa. You could say that it's similar to concrete, but with more lightweight aggregate options. Pause to see the explanation on the screen if you're unfamiliar. Hypertufa is more of a concept rather than a specific recipe, and there are numerous variants of it, but I used a fairly standard recipe that goes as follows. First we have 1.5 parts peat moss. You want it to be the fine and soil-like variant, rather than large sphagnum moss chunks. You could also use cocoa fiber instead, which is probably more environmentally friendly. Next, we have 1.5 parts perlite or vermiculite or a mix of both. This will contribute to the porous surface of the Hypertufa, giving it a perfect texture for moss and other plants to adhere to. This will also keep down the weight of the final construction compared to what you would get using some other materials. I decided to use a 50-50 mixture of perlite and vermiculite, since I only had half a bag of each, but you could use one or the other. Finally, we have 1 part Portland cement, which is normal cement. This is the key ingredient and the binding material that keeps it all together. The proportions aren't super exact, and as you can see, I just eyeballed it. There is a lot of room to get creative and change up the recipe. The first step is to mix up the dry ingredients. Then add a tiny bit of water and mix it thoroughly. Then add a bit more water, mix it up a bit more, add more water and continue slowly like that for a while. The final product shouldn't be dripping wet, but it should definitely be wet enough so that it will be one coherent unit when you apply it. It's important that you mix it up slowly so the peat in it gets to properly absorb the moisture. Some people even recommend letting the hypertufa sit for 10 to 15 minutes after you're done mixing it before you apply it, for this same purpose, which is probably a good idea, but I didn't learn about this until after I had finished the project. Now it was time to apply the hypertufa to the foam panels. After covering the first small part, I realized that my hypertufa mixture was too dry. It felt like crumbs squeezed together rather than a clearly coherent unit, so I removed it and added more water to the mixture off camera before adding it back. You will probably have to experiment on your own here and use common sense. I wanted the hypertufa layer to be at bare minimum 1 cm and preferably around 2 cm thick across the whole thing. For those of you who don't use the metric system, my deepest condolences, but that's at bare minimum 0.4 and preferably 0.8 inches. The thinner the layer, the less stable it will be. In the horticulture field, a lot of people talk about using various types of reinforcements in their hypertufa constructions, which are mostly pots and trays. For instance, the reinforcements could be adding glass fibers into it, or maybe even incorporating a chicken wire mesh or something like that into the construction itself. However, it's worth noting that in a vivarium there won't be any significant temperature fluctuations and there won't be too much load on the hypertufa. So I think this wasn't necessary in my case, and the final product seems very stable without any additional reinforcements. When I had covered the whole panel, I used a wooden stick to clarify the edges of the rocks. I also made some cracks on individual rocks to make it look a bit more interesting. I think it makes sense and looks the best if you have all the main cracks facing roughly the same direction and then have smaller secondary cracks branching out from them in different directions, but you can do whatever you think looks best. Now it's time for it to cure. There is one very important thing to know here. The slower it dries, the more stable the hypertufa will be once it's done. For this reason, it's common to cover it in a layer of plastic for a while to retain the moisture, and some people also missed it every once in a while during this process. However, when I got to this point, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing at all, and I only learned afterwards that it was supposed to dry slowly and that you were supposed to retain moisture by covering it up. I just simply left it to cure in my garage for 2 days and then left it inside for 5 more days while I was on vacation. During the first 2 days, it was raining a lot and the humidity stayed high, so maybe this is what saved the build, who knows. This worked fine in my case, but knowing this, I will probably do things differently in the future. It's also very important that the hypertufa is completely cured all the way through to the core before you continue. I was expecting it to be hard enough after only a day or 2, but it took a lot longer, despite me not putting any effort into slowing down the process. Once the surface is completely dry, you should probably let it sit for a few more days to be safe. Now that it's cured, we're actually not completely done yet. This is because the surface of the freshly cured hypertufa is very alkaline from the cement, so for that reason, it's not a very good idea to put it in the vivarium immediately. The pH value will go down naturally over time, but it's going to take quite a while. Luckily, there are ways to speed up that process. I decided to place it outside during a rainy period. I sprayed it down with a hose 3 to 5 times per day for a week, and there was also more than 80 millimeters of rain during that time. I also misted it with citric acid a few times. I don't have access to any pH testing kit, but I'm pretty sure this should have been enough. Now the panels are done and ready to be mounted into the vivarium. I was considering painting them with some acrylic paint to make them a bit more grey and to get some more color variation throughout them, but I had none on hand and got really lazy, so I decided to keep the original look of the hypertufa. Something that remains to be seen, which I'm really looking forward to, is seeing the hypertufa age over time. The surface layer of cement will probably get slightly eroded, exposing more of the aggregates, and the surface level peat will probably break down and get washed away eventually. For this reason, I didn't want to seal the surface of this structure, which of course eliminated the option of painting it with the color fix that I used to paint and seal the tree that I built in the last episode. Overall, I'm very pleased with the result of this, and I will definitely use hypertufa more times in the future. I think the main reason that I like this method so much is the structure of the rock itself. It not only looks like rocks, but it also feels like rocks rather than just painted styrofoam. I also have very high hopes that mosses and epiphytes will attach to it well due to the porous surface of it. The method takes a while since you need to let it cure and neutralize it, so it's great if you start working on it a long time in advance. But for the little time that you put into actually doing the work on it, I think the result is absolutely amazing. Next week on Vivarium Rebirth, it's finally time to put it all together and complete this vivarium. Among other things, you will see a bunch of cool plant species and my first ever proper water feature. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you are too. Thank you so much for getting this channel to 5,000 subscribers. A few years ago, I would not have believed that we could get here. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing, because I spend a lot of time making these videos. Subscribing is completely free and it's a great way to support me. As always, thank you for watching. If you want to see more of my animal room, feel free to check out my Instagram page, where I sometimes post sneak peeks of my new projects before I share them on YouTube.